putting their professional career on the line and their personal stability on the line for these issues. So, I mean, I didn't actually know about that. I did know that he had the commentary that I wrote on the Terry Schiavo part of this was from him. From
he's like
a journal.
prolific in end of life care.
Yes,
but kind of on the extreme end that can make some people, I think, uncomfortable because he's willing to say, like, I do this covertly. Like, I write scripts for my patients and tell them how to take it.
No, there's a lot of doctors, that's what I'm saying, like, just because it's illegal doesn't mean it's not happening.
Yeah.
Like, it's definitely happening, especially for these caregivers who are on the ground level and dealing with it all the time and see what's going on and you're like, something's gotta give.
Yeah.
So.
Did you have another?
I have one last question that you do not need to ever address here, I don't think, but just for sake of right now. So I work at a Catholic hospital, ironically called Dignity Health, and
it's a subjective phenomenon.
Yeah.
So
a new statistic came out because we just merged with Catholic Health Initiatives, which is like all over the country. That 1 out of 6 hospital beds in the United States is a Catholic hospital bed. So, I mean, really, your odds of ending up in a Catholic hospital are really high. So the Catholic Church is not real down with helping people hasten their death. So I just wonder what that means. You know, you had communicated to Christian, I think his name was? Yes, okay. That you were kind of hopeful that maybe this legislation will eventually pass. And I get a little nervous because of the Catholic influence, and I work for a Catholic institution. And also, we have an organization here in Arizona, CAPC. Do you know if that's what it's actually called? No. Okay, so this very conservative.
That's a committee on campus that's really difficult. But
okay, well then maybe they're like related. So they have the most lobbying money in the state. And so the Arizona Hospital Association puts on this training to help people like me go there and get trained and then go back to my hospital and help people have end-of-life conversations. They had to call it thoughtful life conversations because calling it end-of-life conversations ended up being called death panels and that. So
that's my favorite term.
Right, exactly. And so CAPC is very, they're very skeptical of physicians. They think physicians
already like a problem.
Yeah, and they think physicians are out to like pull the plug on grandma, and now we have tons of hospitals that are Catholic.
That's why I'm also weary of even talking about the expenditure at end of life on medical care because that is a little bit damning when you're talking about like, well, there is maybe some sway in this area. It's going to destroy the credibility even more to bring up that conversation. But go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got this issue of, okay, well, it's way cheaper to have a hospice bed at home than it is to be in the ICU. So you've got this economic utilitarian argument. So people are like, well, you want to pull the plug on grandma because it's cheaper. And then you've got Catholics who can be vitalists, not all of them, but some of them. And then you've got these political action organizations here in Arizona in particular. And I've been getting a little nervous lately that it's getting worse. The whole conversation around like, and end of life care and moving towards, which is interesting because on my ethics committee at St. Joe's, they're like, yeah, let's shut it down when people are suffering. Like, it's not an issue in practice. But at this political level, I'm getting more fearful.
And that's always what stresses me out and why I don't want to do research on one specific area isolated, because I don't think we can talk about this as an isolated issue, that it is just a medical issue or that it is just a spiritual, like, personal identification issue. Because there is always this social element of, it's a personal thing. People care for a lot of different reasons, but it's always a social thing, and that social trickles into legislative and policy and court battles and ethics, committees at hospitals having to be like, well, like what are you doing? Like, what do we do now? Like, this family wants this, the patient wants this, like, it's not cut and dry. And I actually think that most of the debate and disagreement and honestly turmoil around all of these things that we're talking about don't come from the terminally ill persons. It's not coming from the people who are actually sick and who are dying. It's coming from do-gooders who are protecting them and from their families. And I also think this goes back to like the time-old like saying that, you know, funerals aren't for the dead, they're for the living kind of thing, like the dying processes and the argument and the protections around them. It's not for the dying, it's for the people who are left behind.
Right.
And I don't know how to address that because it is so personal and people aren't going to listen. And I just think I do worry about it becoming more divisive because it is one of those things that as it gets pushed forward, instead of people adopting it like you would think, some people just swing the other direction. So it's interesting. And you're right, the Catholic like bishops do like funnel so much funding into these issues. So
Yes, they do. I have a suspicion that it will take those people who feel a very particular way about this to have an experience with their own loved one suffering. I think that might be the only way that this.
Unfortunately,
Which is
a
why
lot of
the
people have
advocacy
been
groups are
doing
using
it.
those.
Are they using narratives?
They're using narratives to humanize the process of dying and to
they're
show
powerful.
That's
diverse
exactly
it is.
right.
One of my friends made me the other day. I was going through slides, and she's in the design field, so she's completely a layman with this, unaffiliated. And she was like, "Have you heard about the documentary Endgame?" I was like, "No, what's that?" And she's like, "Well, it was at some film festival. It's a big deal. Like, look it up." And I watched the little commercial for it, or like the little short version of it. And it's like 6 minutes long, and I was crying by the end of it.
Yeah,
Like, it's just like
Yeah.
those personal testimonies, and it was about like somebody who wants to like end their life, and they tried to commit suicide because they have like a different variation of multiple sclerosis. Basically, it's a degenerative disorder, and they were basically strapped into a hospital bed and not allowed to like pursue that because people were like, well, like no, he's trying to commit suicide. He's like, I'm dying, and you're not letting me like die, man. It was like a horrible situation, and so these personal testimonies are very powerful.
Yep.
We'll see how powerful we'll be moving forward. I keep saying that it's going to take, because I think that's why the Oregon situation finally had some give. And I talked about this in my last study. I don't know if you remember reading that one of the senators there had, like in the late 80s and early 90s, he had terminal illness, and I think pancreatic cancer and some version of paralysis, and was in a wheelchair, and it was a public thing, and he ended up dying while he was in office, while they were trying to pass the Oregon Death with Dignity Act, and I actually think that made a big difference in
I
pushing
think you're
it
right,
forward.
and it makes you wonder, you know, John McCain supporting the ACA
I was
ultimately
really,
when he already had glioblastoma, you know?
Yeah.
And you wonder, would he have voted that way if he wasn't suffering?
No, I actually, and it's going to sound terrible when he got brain cancer, especially since, or the glioblastoma, especially since I have been working in Arizona on this for years. I've been saying it's going to take somebody like in a very public position to deal with a very awful end of life process for people to like listen. And I still wonder like if any impact was made from that, or if, because his family did handle it so like dignified, like
Very
quietly.
It was very private, yeah.
Yeah, it was such a quiet process that it's like, I want the best for them, but also I was wondering if that would sway anything in Arizona. So there will always be another person, though. This is a very large phenomena that we all deal with. There will be somebody else who deals with this
Turns
in a
out
very
100% of
interesting
us
way.
die. Turns out.
Yeah, that's the part where
It's the like
where
how.
we've decided it isn't natural. I have trouble with that. Like,
I
it's
know.
like, you know, like
I think people have like a
Death and
fantasy.
taxes, right?
I just
Right,
don't
yeah.
think about it.
Yeah.
A fantasy
Anyway.
of being like old and you know,
Right.
and you're like surrounded by your like great grandchildren, and
Right.
like, and then anything other than that is unpalatable. So.
Right.
it's
the
a
actual-
fantasy with the young, I think.
The actual dying process is really foreign too, and it looks scary.
Yeah.
And if you've watched people die, there's a lot of natural steps that they progress through,
Yeah.
but there's not a lot of education about what those
No.
steps are and what they look like and what's
No.
normal. And so it's a lot of anxiety for families that are going through that too.
Well, it's yeah, our culture, it's
Has
been
completely
removed
divorced that.
from
Well,
Yeah.
it's also been like Hollywood
Common
too,
experience.
where like people who die, they just like close